think maybe we had a little bit more time to process it, so it wasn't as, it felt like everybody was reacting a lot stronger than I guess I expected. But it's great that, you know, to see people engaged and interested, and, you know, I just hope that we can calm the landscape a little bit. I don't think it's as earth-shattering as maybe people think it is, although it's really, really interesting, and I'm excited to see, you know, what else is discovered about it.
Yeah, interesting, definitely not boring right now. I think this is all awesome because I'm all about trying to learn, and sometimes no disrespect to the ball python game, but some information can become stagnant, and you're just raising up snakes and just waiting for another Canova vlog, you know. But this is kind of crazy, so I want to kind of talk about exactly what this really means, not only for anyone who keeps and works with DG, but just the whole test results of DG. First and foremost, is it even worth doing DG testing because of it's not 100%? Correct me if I'm wrong, or let's kind of talk about the actual, you know, is it worth testing DG for DG right now?
So when they were looking at one gene, it wasn't 100%. And that was kind of where the issue was, you know, wherein the issue lies, right? So, but now the tests that they're doing are actually testing for both of those mutations. So they can actually tell you not only with 100% accuracy whether or not it's het DGA, they can also tell you if it's het DGB. Now, the part that is still up in the air is in regards to that DGC, which is this like unknown mutation that we still don't have the location for, but is theorized that it's kind of the key to why some animals that are heterozygous for DGA and heterozygous for DGB sometimes appear visual, and while other times they don't. So I don't know if that makes it more confusing or not, but the answer is if you're looking for, if you're looking to find out not just whether or not your animal's het DG, you can find that out. You can also find out exactly which DGA or DGB, whether they're heterozygous or homozygous for both of those mutations.
David.
Yes.
Okay, because
in the back.
I only kind of watched the video. I'll admit it. I watched half of it. So let's just say you have an animal that's het A, but also it's the poly gene that's making it a visual, even though it's not an actual visual of both types, are both A and B together, or just A on one side or both sides. Question is, if you have an animal that's poly and het, that means you're making pos hets and selling them as hets?
So this is where it gets interesting. So you cannot have, okay, so in order, as far as the research has shown so far, there are no visuals that aren't at least het A and het B. So with that being said, the chances of producing non-visuals from an actual visual is really slim. But there have been anecdotal reports of it. And I think as we continue to move forward with testing more animals, we'll be able to see when we test the parents and test the babies, what the actual results are there. But as of now, yes, I think there is a slight possibility, but I don't think it's something to be overly concerned about because we've been operating under the assumption that all of this works like simple genetics for the past 2 decades. And for the most part, everybody's been fine. Does that make sense?
All right. Well, I guess one reason I bring it up too is, you know, there's been a lot of collections that have had DGs just randomly pop up in random pairings. That's something that I've dealt with a lot with Ben's collection. I guess my question is it, I'm just happy to run into hets on both sides, or am I running a het on one side and then the poly gene that's making it almost look like a desert ghost?
That could very well be. Again, I think the trouble is just not really having that third gene identified yet. I think that's really going to answer all these questions that people have. But yeah, I mean, that very well could be the case because anecdotally, people have had clutches where they produced animals that didn't look DG, but because they thought they had to be, they thought, well, maybe it's low expression, or maybe it's been dual sired or had retained sperm. And then likewise, DGs, you know, have, like you're saying, have popped up from pairings that maybe they shouldn't have. And then also there's this idea that every now and then people get these DGs that are just lower quality, and maybe that has something to do with that third gene.
Okay.
I have a question. Isn't this kind of real similar to hypo? Because I know there's better versions of hypo. I know hypos are recessives, but from throughout my time of being in this for the last 7 years, I've noticed better quality of hypo as well. Now I don't know if that's the orange ghost or whatever, but I've always been a huge fan of like making sure I keep the hypo quality as high as possible. And when I'm hearing with DG, you breed DG to DG, you get DG, but it's the what level of DG, correct? Is that what we're trying to figure out?
There seems to be some level of there of whether or not this homozygous for A and B or heterozygous for A and B, or what, you know, if there is a C or D, or those may play a factor. It seems like all those play a role in how good the animal looks. And again, if you were to go a visual to visual clutch, you might get some that are really low expression because not all those genes are hitting on them, but you'd still call them DGs. You'd still assume they're DGs because you're working under that simple recessive assumption.
And then how many DGs, Justin, have you hatched out where you're like, this one doesn't look as nice as that one? Has that been, like, you can be honest about that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say several times a year. I've had a clutch where I was like, eesh. In fact, Summer and I were just before the podcast, we were just going over some pictures from a couple DG to DG clutches where there's one animal that, like, it's not just a head, but man, it doesn't look as good as the rest, right? And so, and that's from a DG to DG pairing. And so you start to see those, you start to say, okay, there is a variation there. Maybe it wasn't super obvious when you didn't think to look for it, but you can look at it in hindsight.
Mm-hmm. In regards to whether it's similar to hypo, I think from a visual standpoint, you can think of it that way, but we do know from the testing that hypo is actually just a simple recessive. So genetically, no.
Yeah, right. On paper, that's no, but I'm saying visually, I mean, Justin, obviously you do know there's better versions of everything in a sense that we work with, right?
Sure.
Sure. But I don't know.
Better versions of normals compared to other normals, right? I
And
think
that's
in the end, right?
But then also too, and then that's kind of like, I mean, think about when normals were the only jam we could work with, right? Whoa, Dave, what is that? Can you please?
It's a dog. It's a dog. It's a dog, buddy. We're back. Don't even worry about it if that happens again, man. I'll take care of it. Sorry.
Can you put that away though? Like whatever that is.
The dog? I gotta put the dog away?
It's not a dog. I'm just saying, you know what I'm saying? Anyways, I don't even know what I was gonna say now. Oh, I got it. Okay. It's my co-host. I just do know that when it comes to just working with stuff and there's better versions of it, as the breeder, we hold back the stuff that we feel is better. But how many times if you hold back those gems, Justin, and you bred the gems, are you still getting those one-offs like, oh, that's not what I was looking for? Like even with the gems?
So the thing is that with ball python breeding, there's a little bit, or maybe even a lot of holding back the best looking animals. But if you're just doing that, I think you're going to find yourself pretty far behind in this industry, in the sense of it's more about what additional genes it has that causes you to hold them back. And so, yeah, I'd like to hold back the best looking regular desert ghost in the world, but I'm not going to hold that one back over the one that has 4 other incomplete dominants in it. Right. So yeah, to an extent I am, but it's also within the larger picture of what other genes are present in the animal.
Right.
But I do think that sort of environment where you are keeping the best looking animals year after year after year, what you're doing is you are, I think, to an extent within a good collection, you've aggregated a lot of the desert ghosts that are homozygous for A and B over time, because you're keeping the best looking ones.
Yeah, I mean, Summer, excuse me. What everything as far as feedback and what people are talking about, what would be a disadvantage